It sometimes seems to me that we owe to great sin much of our great art. So much of the art that you admire was commissioned by popes and cardinals and princes who led debauched, corrupt lives. So many of the great artists had patrons who were themselves depraved. And I wonder what you think about this coupling between immorality and inspiration.
Well, I don't know whether we can say they were sinful. They were just stupid, uninstructed. The only person we can ever say has committed a sin is ourselves, and even there we may be wrong, because only God can judge. We can say they did dreadful things, but what the heart was, only God can tell. So I feel great compassion for these poor, muddled popes.
How do you feel when you discover a discrepancy between the character of the artist and the quality of the work? I mean, David, during the French Revolution, had no second thoughts about thousands of people going to the guillotine. Picasso, we were talking about women, Picasso cruelly mistreated women. I mean, what does it say that a dreadful, immoral person, if one wants to pass judgment, can produce great art?
I think one must make an absolute distinction between what the artist is like and what the work is like. All that concerns us, all that we can judge, is the work. And as for the artist, either an artist creates art of the good in them, or an artist creates art of a desire for a good that isn't in them. I'm quite interested in artists in a sort of vulgar, gossipy way, but I'm not in the least interested in them as far as the quality of the work goes, which is why I particularly love medieval art, where we don't know anything about who painted it. And I think we can see more clearly, because it's very hard to look at David and not remember him voting for the execution of the king.
You've said that all art that really draws us to look deeply at it is spiritual.
Yes.
In what sense?
Because it's going to deepen our awareness of the things that matter. It's going to make us, to refer to what we said earlier, more a person of integrity, more true to my own essence than I would have been without this encounter. It's like meeting a great genius, just talking, even being in the presence of such a person. You feel enriched, enlightened. You're more than you were before you had that encounter. Well, that's what painting is perpetually offering us. Encounters with greatness.
Is religious art synonymous with spiritual
No,
power?
not at all.
Not at all?
Religious art can be spiritual, but it can be very dull. Religious art works on an iconography, and it works to the extent that you believe in it. If you believe in this image, then the image will remind you of your faith and will have a religious effect.
It's a vehicle to God for the devout.
Yes, yes. Spiritual art will take you further than you knew you believed. It'll take you into uncharted realms.
And that spiritual power is what?
The spiritual power is this ability to lift us out of the confines of our ego, out of the traps that many people are in. Their relationships, their jobs, their worries, mortgages, health. And there they go round in the cage. And art opens a door and takes you into something bigger than yourself, something immensely exhilarating and refreshing. So when you come back into your cage, you know that's not all there is to life. You know, Kenneth Clark used to say, whenever he got deeply depressed, he'd go and look at something, some great work of art. And there it was, sailing through the centuries. He didn't use these words, these are my words. Untouched by all our littleness and our anxieties. And we're taken into that, not as an escape, but as a way of coming back into our anxieties, more able to put them into perspective. Art is a great means of getting perspective on all that's worrying, depressing, constricting in your life.
What did you mean when you wrote, all great art is spiritual? And I think you've made that clear, but not all great art is sacred. There's a distinction between the spiritual and the sacred?
Yes. Sacred, I think, goes deeper. Sacred is spiritual at its most profound and emphatic. Sacred, I think, is spiritual art where you know it's spiritual, whereas a lot of spiritual art you don't know. Your spirit knows, but you don't know. You're just delighting in it.
Well, what did you mean when you said that sacred art is the most intense communication of personal truth?
Because it's the artist's personal truth confronting your personal truth. If it's great art, if it's sacred art, the artist has managed to put their entire truth there in those images. And your truth encounters them to the extent in which you allow it to. And so you return to yourself enriched by encounter with the master's vision.
And what do you mean by truth here in this personal sense?
Truth is what you're meant to be, but haven't yet perhaps become. Truth is what God made you to be. All your qualities fulfilled. No dead sections that you were afraid to work with within you. No areas of negligence that you just didn't bother to take seriously. I suppose the only person who was wholly true was Christ, who said, I am the truth. But that's what we aspire to become utterly what we were meant to be.
What is your favorite sacred art that does this for you?
Well, I'm torn between saying Poussin and Cézanne. I think those are two profoundly sacred artists. It's more perhaps materially obvious in Poussin, who paints pictures of the seven sacraments, for example, but it's just as true in Cézanne, painting card players or the mountain or apples. A man whose vision was so almost painfully seeking to be utterly receptive to what was there, not to cheat in any way, that we become more uncheating when we encounter it. Because we all cheat, unconsciously, if no other way. But Cézanne helps us to be true.
Here's another paradox. In the 9th episode of In the 9th episode